Good evening. We're learning Maseches Pesachim Daf Samaches. We're starting 10 lines from the bottom of Samach Zayin on the base. So let me mute all of you. Says the Gemara as follows. We learned yesterday the following, and this is Amar Mar. Amar Mar, of course, is always a reference to that which we've learned prior, 3/4 of the way down, 10 lines up. Amar Mar, we learned that Zav and Bechol Zav. What's the language of Bechol? When we were speaking about a Zav, why was there a more inclusive language? Says the Gemara, L'Rabus Balkari, to include a Balkari, someone who has zera, leave their body, that they are similar to a zav. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan. This supports an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. What does Rabbi Yochanan say? He says two statements in one moment, one that has nothing or little to do with the other. It says, Rabbi Yochanan, Mechilos lo niskachu. Mechilos were the tunnels. If you remember the Mishnah, we learned this many moons ago, that if in the room where all the Kohanim were sleeping, if one of them had a mikra laila, so there was a way to go to the mechilos, into the tunnels, to get to the mikvah, and then there would be no tumah. But those mechilos were not niskachu, they were not holy, so therefore the Balkari was allowed there, because the Balkari is limited in where he can go, and that's really part of statement number 2. Balkari mishtalech chutz l'shtei machanos. And a Balkari, someone who has a mikra laila, even if someone who has tashmish amita, whatever the case may be, if they've had zera, so they are mishtalech chutz l'shtei machanos. They're kicked out of the 2 inner machanos. Last night I called it machane kohen. That's an error. It's machane shchina. I said the wrong thing. I apologize. It's machane shchina, machane levia, machane Yisrael. So he's kicked out. The Balkari is kicked out of 2 of the machanos. So the Gemara is bothered by the fact that Rabbi Yochanan seems to assume that a Balkari is kicked out of 2 machanos. So let's figure it out. Let's try to understand. Meisvei, hold on one second. We have a brisa. It's actually a Mishnah in Maseches Zavim. I think it's in Zavim. Where is it? Yeah. So it's in Zavim. It says Balkari kemaga sheretz, that a Balkari is similar to the tuma of a maga sheretz. Of if one of the Shmona Shratzim is able to give tuma to another, so then if that's similar to a Balkari, my lav lamachanosam, isn't that true that they're similar in regards to which machana the maga sheretz is allowed into? He's allowed into the machana levia, but Rabbi Yochanan says the Balkari is not allowed in the machana levia. He's kicked out of 2 machanos, the machana shchina and the machana levia. So that's a kash against Rabbi Yochanan. Says no, it's not a kash in Rabbi Yochanan. Lo, that's not what the comparison of Balkari is to maga sheretz. What's the comparison? The tumasam, that they have a similar amount of tuma. Says the Gemara, I don't need a Mishnah in Zavim to teach me that. Those are psukim, the tumasam. Absolutely not. I don't need a Mishnah for that. Hi tumas erev ksiv bei. Hi tumas erev ksiv bei. There's psukim that refer to the tumah of the maga sheretz and the mikra laila and the person who's a Balkari. So that can't be alav machanosam. It must therefore be that the comparison of a Balkari to a maga sheretz that we saw in Maseches Zavim is in fact about machanosam, and that again brings back our kash against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the Balkari has to be kicked out of 2 machanos, machane shchina, machane levia. The Balkari is only allowed in the machane Yisrael. However, the maga sheretz is allowed even in the machane levia. Stira, so how can Rabbi Yochanan go against the Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, no, really. That's not correct. Lo olam, really, it's letumasa. Really, the comparison of the Mishnah Zavim of the Balkari and the maga sheretz is about tuma, but not in the way you think. Not about the volume of time, because both of them do have a pasuk about Arab. That's not what it's about. So rather, what is the tuma aspect that is similar between the Balkari and the maga sheretz? As the Gemara, the Balkari can maga sheretz in the following way: maga sheretz mitame beones, af Balkari mitame beones. Just like a person who became tamei by touching a sheretz would become tamei even if it was beones. He didn't intentionally step on the animal. Someone threw the animal at him. It's totally an ones, totally out of his control entirely. So the halacha is af Balkari mitame beones. It's also true if a Balkari sees zera from ones. So it is an element of tuma. And because the comparison in the Mishnah and Zavim between Balkari and maga sheretz is not about the machane, but rather is about the tuma, so now there's no longer a question against Rabbi Yochanan's shita that the Balkari is michutz l'shtei machanos. He's really kicked out of the machane kahuna and the machane levia. That is no longer a problem for Rabbi Yochanan. However, the Gemara does push a little further, because we have a continuing Mishnah in Maseches Zavim that leaves an impression on what we've already learned. Meisive, turning to the top of Samaches Mid Aleph, Boel Nida Kitame Meis, that a man who has Tashmish Amita with a Nida has an equivalence to someone who has Tame Meis, a very strong equivalence. So says the Gemara, Lemain. What is the comparison? If you want to say that their tuma is the same, that's not true. It can't be that the Mishnah is there to tell me that the tuma of someone who is Boel Anida, who has Tashmish Amita with Anida, is the same as a Tamei Mes. It can't be, because just like in the previous Mishnah on Zavim, here too we have psukim that stipulate that fact, that hi tumas shiva ksibe, but hi tumas shiva ksibe. We have psukim in regards to these two areas of Bo'ol Nida and Tamei Meis, that they both have Sheva Yamin. So that can't be what the Mishnah is equating between the Bo'ol Nida and the Tamei Meis. Elolav, it must be the Machanosam. It must be that it's talking about the Machanos, in which case, what would then be true? Umi the Seifa the Machanosam. And since this later Mishnah, Maseches Zavim, is talking about the Machanos, maybe we should argue that Reisha Nami Lemachanosim, that the beginning Mishnah, the one that we started with in the Bryce on the bottom, the one that says Balkari Kemagashert, is also talking about Machanosam, rejecting our conclusion that really in that previous Mishnah in Zavim, that the comparison between a Balkari and a Magashert is to teach us that Ones is the common denominator. Says the Gemara, no. If the Seifa is talking about a machanosam, which camp they should be in, the Reisha should also be talking about what camp they should be in. But if the Reisha is talking about what camp it's the machana you're in, so that's a big problem for Rabbi Yochanan, because it contradicts his opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says the Balkari is only allowed in the Machana Yisrael. He's excluded from the Machana Kahuna Machana Levia. And the comparison in the Gemara and Zavim, in the Mishnah and Zavim, which says that a Balkari is like Magasheretz, would allow the Magasheretz in the Machana of the Levia. So then the Gemara would be back to its question. Answers the Gemara, we're on the top of Daf Samaches Samad Aleph, about 5 lines down. Midi area. What is your problem? Why can't the Reisha be talking about Tuma of Ones between the Balkari and the Magasheretz? And why can't the Seifa that's talking about Bo'ol Nida and Tamei Meis be talking about Machanosam? They don't have to be talking about the same thing. Why is that even a question to start with? I mean, I guess if you're reading a book, the whole thing should have a theme. But these are different sections of halacha within Maseches Zavim. No reason to assume that they're the same. Says the Gemara, let me try still further. Meisive, 6 lines down, Samaches Samad Aleph. The Gemara asks from a source in the Tanaim. Mitzora chamor mizav. A mitzora, yesterday we learned about a mitzora, that they have priyo frima, they have to grow out their hair, and they have to have their clothes torn. So they're chamor mizav. They are more stringent than someone who sees this discharge of a zav. The zav chamor mitamei meis. And a zav is more chamor than a tamei meis. And we said yesterday why that's true, because the zav is a roko vizovo. All of the discharges from the zav are still going to be the avatuma that doesn't apply by a mace. So that's the first 2 steps. And then says the Gemara, quoting this brisa, yatsa, to exclude balkari. Tamei meis chamor mimenu. But it's a little unclear. What does it mean? Yatsa balkari from what? To say that tamei meis is chamor mimenu. What are you being yotze the balkari from? We don't know what category it was in. My yatsa, what are you excluding the balkari from? La yatsa michlal zav. Uva lechlal tamei meis. Are we saying that really it should be that the balkari and the zav are the same? But what this brisa is doing is excluding the balkari from the world of zav and putting it in the category of tamei meis. Tamei meis chamor mimenu umuter b'machane levia. Because then what we would then see is that the tamei meis is allowed in the machane levia. And if you're saying that a balkari is in the same class as a tamei meis and that the balkari is allowed in the machane levia, then this brisa contradicts Rabbi Yochanan. Because Rabbi Yochanan said the balkari is outside of 2 machanos. Rabbi Yochanan held that the balkari is not allowed in the machane kahuna or in the machane levia. Yet this brisa says that if what we're doing is taking a balkari and moving him from being an equal to a zav and making the balkari an equal to a tamei meis, so then you have a problem, because the tamei meis is allowed in the machane levia. And therefore, if that's true, a balkari should also be allowed in the machane levia in the brisa, and therefore contradiction against Rabbi Yochanan. So it says umuter b'machane levia. It says more low. You have it all wrong. Yatsa. What does it mean? Yatsa, that we exclude the case of balkari. Yatsa mimachane tamei meis v'nichnas l'machane zav. The other way we put it, we don't put it in the camp of the tamei meis, and we do put it in the camp of the machane zav. V'afal gav the tamei meis chamor mimenu the muter b'machane levia. Even though you're right that technically speaking, the balkari should be less chamor, should be more of an obvious case as it relates to tamei meis. However, the reason why we don't put the balkari with the case of tamei meis is because the ma'ideh dami le medamin le. Zera and zav exit the same part of the body. They exit the aver. So therefore, the Gemara equates them that even though halachically and conceptually we should be putting the case of balkari as a lower status than the tamei meis, but because the nature of the discharge is similar in its form, as it relates to Balkari and to Zav. So therefore, it's equated that way, and therefore it's not a kasha in Rabbi Yochanan. So it says the Gemara, Tani Tana, Kame de Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi. There was a drasha that was made about this exact topic, about which machane the Balkari is excluded from. One pasuk says, Vayotze, Vayetze. It says, Vayotze. Vayotze el michutz lamachane, that he has to leave the camp. Says the Brisa, Zo machane shchina. He first has to leave the machane shchina. So let's say you have a person who's in the machane shchina, and he has a mikra laila. He has to leave. If he has a seminal emission, he has to leave the machane shchina. Lo yavo el tocha machane. What does the next phrase mean? He can't go into the camp. He's leaving the shchina, but he can't go into the machane. What does that pasuk mean? Zo machane levia. So he has to leave. Mikan the balkeri sheyetze chutz l'shtei machanos. This is a beautiful raya for the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan. However, says the Gemara, Omar Lein. So there was someone who was teaching in front of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi said back to him, I don't understand. Akati lo ayalte apikte. Before I even get to where I'm going, I'm kicked out again. Meaning he's in the Shechina. He's in the Machane Shechina, and he becomes a Mikra Laila. He sees there, he becomes a Balkari. So he's kicked out. But where does he get kicked out to? The next, it's concentric rings. So in the middle is the Machane Shechina. The ring around that is the Machane Levia. Where are you going to go? You can't skip over the Machane Levia. The pasuk can't mean that it's usher to walk through the Machane Levia, because then you can't go anywhere. You haven't gone anywhere, but you're stuck. If you're in the Machane Shechina and the next drasha says you can't walk into the Machane Levia, what do you do? What do you do? So it says they can't. It's just not a simple pshat in the psukim. Lishna Harina. Another way to ask the same question is akati lo apikte ayalte. Just another way to say you haven't even left yet, and now you have to go out again. Basically the same question. So it says the Gemara, Elaima, we have to reverse the drashas. Michutz lamachane. In the earlier part of the pasuk, when it says v'yatzal michutz lamachane, whereas above we said that was referring to the Machane Shechina. Here we're saying no. Zo machane levia, that if the person who was a balkari was in the machane levia, and that's where he became a balkari, so then he has to leave. But where does he go to? Lo yavo el tocha machane zo machane shchina. Where should he not go to? He should not go to a place of more kedusha. He should not go to the machane of the shchina. He should go to the machane Yisrael. Very good. So it says the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down, Samaches Samad Maskif Ravina. Maybe we could have said Ema Idi V'Idi Lamachane Shechina. Maybe both parts of the pasuk were really referring to the same thing. This would be a kasha in Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said that the Balkari is excluded both from the Machane Kahuna and the Machane Levia. Maybe, says Ravina, we could assume that each part of the pasuk was referring to the Machane Shechina. Why does it say Machane twice? To teach you V'Lav or Lav Be'aseh V'Lo Saseh, that maybe there's both an Isser D'Oraisa and a Mitzvah Saseh that one could violate by having the word machane twice. Says the Gemara, that's not right. In Kain lemakra, if what you're saying is true, that the pasuk was trying to teach us that there's an asay attached to it as well, then the pasuk should have said vayetze el michutz lamachane v'lo yavo el toch. Why does it have to say the word machane again? Just say, don't go in. V'lo yavo el tocho. Just, you don't have to say the word machane twice. Why do we add that word? Shmami no litin lo machane acheres. So the Gemara here therefore says as follows. Like this conclusion of the Gemara says that if you're in the machane levia, you have to leave. So this supports the sheets of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said that a balkari is obligated to leave the machane kahuna and the machane levia as well. So we said in our Mishnah, u'michui kravav. Remember, we said that one is allowed to cut open the animal. So what does that mean? Michui kravav. So it says the Gemara, my michui kravav. What is this talking about? Michui kravav. This is a machlokes. Rav Huna amar shemenakvan besakin. Rav Huna says that you're allowed to make a nekev, make a hole in the animal with a sakin, with a knife. You can take the knife and kind of turn the knife and make a little hole in there and then cut downwards, no problem at all. Chia barav omar sirka de me'eha, the slippery, greasy parts of the me'eha, the oily parts of the body that are now on the knife, the nafka, agav dochka de sakina. You can remove them with dochka de sakina by pressing the knife into something that will kind of like a hard surface. We would normally do it into the ground, but there's nothing like that in the mikdash. But that would be allowed to do. You can put it into some kind of hard surface to clean the greasy parts off of the knife. Amar Rebbe Lazar, my time with the Chia Barav. Why does he say dochka de sakina? Why does he say that you're allowed to clean off the greasy parts in that way? So answers the Gemara. The reason why he says that is because v'charvos mechim garim yochelu. So says the Gemara that we don't know what this means yet. Says the Gemara, my mashma. What are the implications here? What are the words? It means kidimitargim Rav Yosef, as Rav Yosef explains. Rav Yosef was a baki in the targum of Rav Yonasan ben Uziel. So what does he say that Rav Yonasan ben Uziel says? V'nichsehen derishia, the property of the evil, tzadikaya yachsenun, will be inherited by the righteous. So what was this even talking about? So the reference here in the Gemara is that the greasy parts of the animal will be cleaned off by, the bad parts will be removed by the good. The bad will be removed by the good. So there's a bad part, we're going to remove it by doing dochka de sakina. So it's kind of like a drasha. What does the beginning of that pasuk mean? V'ra'u kivasim kidabram. What does the beginning of the pasuk mean? Amar Rav Menashe bar Yirmiyah. Amarav kimedu barbam. The play on the words of kidabram is kimedu barbam. Okay, what does that mean? My kimedu barbam. Amarabai v'charvos mechim gerim yochelu. That those who are evil, same drasha as before, as Rav Yosef, that it will be inherited by those who are righteous. Amar le Rava, maybe bishlama iksiv charvos kidika amris. If it would have said the word charvos without the vav, without vicharvos, then I could have agreed to your drasha that the righteous would have inherited from the evil. However, hashta dechsiv vicharvos milsach reisikam, I disagree with you. So therefore, ela amar Rava kidirav Chananel amar Rav. Rava says it must be for a different reason. What's pshat in the pasuk? The amar Rav Chananel amar Rav asidin tzadikim sheyichyu es hamesim. He says pshat in this pasuk must be different. It must be that in the future the tzadikim will resuscitate the dead. The pasuk, our pasuk over here that says like we saw before, kidabram, and then over here, uksiv hasam yiru bashan vigilad kimei olam. Who are Bashan and Gilad? Bashan ze Elisha habamina Bashan sheneemar vaya'anai v'shafat babashan. So we know that that's talking about Elisha. Uksiv, and the pasuk says po. Elisha ben Shafat asher yatzak mayim al yad Eliyahu, and who is Gilad? First of the longest lines, Gilad ze Eliyahu shene'amar v'yam Eliyahu atishbi mitoshvei Gilad. So we know that these two people, Bashan and Gilad, are Elisha and Eliyahu. And Amar of Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar of Yonasan. How does all of this play out? Tzadikim sheyichyu mesim. We have another Mari Makom that supports this second pshat in the pasuk. That what it means, that this pasuk doesn't mean that the tzaddikim will inherit that of the righteous, but rather the pasuk means that the tzaddikim will be able to revive the dead. Shene'emar, od yeshu zakenim uzakenos berchovos Yerushalayim v'ish mishanto biyad merov yamim. Famous drasha, a famous pasuk that explains what things will look like in the future. Mirz Hashem b'karov in Zechariah, that there will be old people sitting in the streets of Yerushalayim, and v'ish mishanto biyado, he'll have his cane with him. Uchsiv, a play on words, v'samti mishanti el penei hanar. This is the story of when Elisha resuscitated the child. The story in Tanakh, the story in Sefer Melachim. Look at the pasuk there on the side if you have it. So that is how we understand the pasuk, that tzaddikim will resuscitate mason, people who have died. 3 lines into the wide lines. Ula ramiksiv, he had a contradiction of psukim. Bila hamaves lanetzach, a famous pasuk that's often quoted at Levinas, that we should wipe away the maves forever, which seems to imply that during the times of Mashiach that there will be no death in the times of Ikfasad Mashiach. Uchsiv, at the same time, there's another pasuk that says Kenar ben mea shana yamus, that people will still die. So says the Gemara, Lo kasha kan b'Yisrael kan be'akum. One is talking about Yisrael, by whom it is shaykh to have tchias hamesim. However, and by that person, bilo hamavis lanetzach. However, kan be'akum, that's where we say Kenar ben mea shana yamus, that there is no tchias hamesim there. Okay, but v'ovdei kochavim may ba'u hasam. What's going on? Why are they involved bichlal? With any aspects of this at all, shouldn't be shaykh to them at all. Says the Gemara, there will be some outsiders, some people who are not part of the klal, or utzonechem, they will be the shepherds for your sheep. Uvnei nechar achrechem, they're going to be the farmers, v'chornechem, the people who work the fields. Rav Chizda Ramik, he asked a different stira, v'chafra halavana busha hachama, that there's going to be a darker light, there's going to be a busha, the sun will not be so bright, but at the same time there's a pasuk that says uksiva haya or halavana k'orachama v'orachama yihyeh shivasayim k'or shivasayamim, really 70 times greater than the light of Bereshis. So how do we deal with these contradictory psukim? One is that there's not going to be so much light, and the other is that the light is so bright. Answers the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom of Maseches Merav Lokashia. Kan olam haba, kan limos hamashiach. It depends. In olam haba, we don't need this bright light. It's going to be a darkened physical light because we have the ziv hashchina. In olam haba, Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's what the Ramchal writes, that the whole point of life, standing on a blade, it's very simple, is lehanos meziv shchinaso, is to be in a place where we can bask in the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not here, not here, but there. In the next world, in Olam Haba, where the sunlight is not bright by any chance, it's considered dark, says the Gemara. It's in fact busha. It's embarrassed to be present in front of the Shechina, in front of the Ziva Shechina. And so said Lokasha kan Olam Haba kan limos Mashiach. Good. So then says the Gemara, well, that answer works according to some, but Ulishmuel da Amar ein bein ha'olam hazeh limos Mashiach el shiva malchios bilvad ma'ikol meimar. Shmuel was of the opinion that there's no difference between Yemos HaMashiach and Olam Haba, except for Shibud Malchios, that there will be peace, that all of the governments will all be aligned with one another. What would we say then according to Shmuel? So it says the Gemara, you're right. Both of them apply to Olam Haba. Velokasha, why is it not a contradiction? Kan b'machne Shechina, kan b'machne tzadikim. So there are different places within Olam Haba. Some will have the light of the Ziva Shechina, and some will have this bright light of Shiva Saim of 70 of the sevenfold. So that's how the Gemara answers that question. And Rava, 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, is going to ask another shiur, which will bring us to the end of the page. Rava Rami Ksiv Ani Amisvechye. The pasuk says, "I will cause death and I will also resuscitate." I can cause illness and I can also heal. So says the Gemara, why bother saying both? Hashta achve mechayev. You can make someone become alive again. Marpe lo kol shekain. If he only has a cold, of course you can make him better. It's obvious. Why is the pasuk speaking in such extraneous terms? Elamar Kodesh Baruch Hu as follows: Mashani meimi sani mechayev. The very one that I cause for death, I will revive. In the same way that when one, in an individual way, of course he's capable of both, but the point is that he who HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows to die will allow for that person to be brought back in Tchias HaMesim, just like he who is no longer well is able to be resuscitated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tanu Rabbanon, a brisa that speaks about the same pasuk, Ani HaMizvech, Yachol Misa Be'echad, Chaim Be'echad, maybe one would think that death happens over here, but the other person is brought to life. No, that's not correct. Says the Gemara, I heal the one that I have given the illness to. The same exact person is going to be revived. And this is a pasuk, this is a pasuk in the Torah. And that means that we have a pasuk in the Torah that explicitly stipulates that there's going to be Tchias HaMesim, and therefore the Gemara says 2 lines from the bottom, Mikan, Shuva la'omrim ein Tchias HaMesim in the Torah. Somebody's going to say there's no Tchias HaMesim in the Torah, you're wrong. Ani amus v'echyeh. Pasuk says that I will cause for death, but I will also cause for Tchias HaMesim. Davar acher, another pshat, B'tchila, ma she'ani memis ani mechayeh. In the beginning, that which I cause to the person who will die, I will heal him. The hadar, and throughout the process of him becoming alive again, I will also add to that masha machat ani arpeh. Within one person, he'll die, I'll get him alive again, and then I'll heal him still more until he's totally healed. Let's turn to the top of Daf Samaches Samad Beis. We said in the Mishnah that the hektar chalavav, that one is allowed to be maktir, to burn the chelev of the animal, the emurim, even when Yud Daled Nisan falls out to be on Shabbos. So says the Gemara, Tanya, a beautiful brisa. Amar Reb Shimon, Bo urei, kama chaviva mitzvah b'shaita. How beautiful is it to do a mitzvah in its time? Shari hektar chalavim ve'evarim ufdarim, ksherim kol halayla. Technically speaking, you could have been maktir the rest of the animal, the chalavim ve'evarim. You could have done that after Shabbos. You could have waited till Motzei Shabbos to burn it. But yet we see it's very, very important to do a mitzvah b'shaita whenever you can. I just had a shaila that came up this week. I think I may have mentioned this already. It's such a blur. I'm supposed to do a bris in Lakeview. It's 7.5 miles away. It's very cold and it's very far, and I'm not walking that far. I called Rabbi first and I said, tell me what to do. And he said, can you get the family to move here for Shabbos? I said, I tried. They're not willing. They're very COVID sensitive. He said, can you get another Moel to go? I said, I'm happy to try. So I picked a young Moel to walk, and he said he wasn't available. So Rabbi first said, yeah, do the bris on Sunday. I mitzvah chaviva b'shaita. Yeah, of course, but you got to look at the whole context and see when it's appropriate to apply that principle. It's always true. It's always true. And had this been a stark Jewish, they would have figured it out. They would have gotten over their fears of COVID, whatever it was. They would have done it. But this family's disconnected, and better that I should do as a from Moab. Better that I should do the bris on day 9 and have it be kosher than have someone who's not from drive on Shabbos, do a bris which is not kosher on Shabbos. It's an Isser D'Oraisa instead of a Mitzvah D'Oraisa, and the bris isn't kosher. Push off the bris. So yeah, this is the job of a posek, is to have the big shoulders. Thank God I'm not Rabbi. That's why I like calling other people for these things. So, and it ended up happening again this week. Nachashayla, that happened again, that a bris was pushed off for one other reason, which is that the concern was that if they weren't going to use a from mole, they were going to use a secular mole. So Rabbi First has told me a number of times that when that's your chush, you don't always know, but when that's your chush from your conversations, just push off the bris one day to make it work for them, because the kid should have a good bris. He should start off right. He's not in a from home. Okay, but that doesn't mean he's not shaykh to the mitzvah of bris milah. So that's chaviva mitzvah b'sharta, that we see that we're allowed to do the hektar chalavim ve'evarim u'fidarim, even though it's mutter kol halayla on Motzei Shabbos, but still the Mishnah writes that it's mutter on Shabbos. So we said as well, there were certainly suri derabanan in our Mishnah, harkavaso v'havaso, carrying the animal and carrying outside the tchum, and also cutting off a yabela, some type of growth, a wart or a mole. We'll use the word wart here. What does it say in the art scroll for yabelas? Does anybody know? Does it say wart? It says wart. Mm-hmm. So we'll use that as our sampling. So it says the Gemara Uraminhu, our Mishnah seems to say that there's an Isser D'Rabanan that says that you're not allowed to do that, but that doesn't stem with all of the sources in the Tanaim, because we have a Gemara in Eruvin. We actually learned this already. I'm sure we all fondly remember. There we had an explicit statement that you are allowed to remove a yabelas. You can remove a wart in the mikdash. Avalo b'medina. It's an Isser D'Rabanan. But in Shvus b'mikdash, it's mutter to remove a yabelas. Yet in our Mishnah, it says that you're not allowed to do that. The im b'kli finishes off the brisa. If it was done with a kli, if you use a scissors, whatever it is, so then kan v'kan usr. That's usr everywhere, implying that it's an isser d'oraisa. So that's our contradiction. Our Mishnah says it's an isser d'rabbanan. You're not allowed to remove a wart. However, this brisa is very, very clear. The only time you're not allowed to remove a wart is when it's an isser d'oraisa. You're doing the cutting b'kli. If you're doing it with a pair of scissors, that's of course going to be problematic. However, if it were to be an Isser D'Rabbanan alone, Ein Shvus B'Mikdash, we would have said that B'Medina it's not allowed, but B'Mikdash it should be mutter to remove the wart, as long as it's done barehanded or it's done in some form Isser D'Rabbanan kind of way. So how do we answer this question? It says the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Bereb Chanina, Machlokes in the Amorai. Chad Amar, Idi v'Idi biyad. Really, both cases, our Mishnah and the Brisa from Eruvin, are both talking about removing the yabeles, the wart, with a bare hand. You're just tearing it off. But ha-belacha, ha-bi'avesha, one is moist and the other is dried out. So the one that's moist is going to be an Isser D'Oraisa. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says it's not allowed because it's not allowed. It's a lacha. It's not allowed. However, Habi Avesha, the one that's dry, that's going to be the Bryce and Eruvin. V'chadam, or the other of these Amorim, gave a different answer. Idi v'idi b'lacha, both of the sources. This our Mishnah, which says that there's an Isser D'Rabbanan of Chatichas Yabelas, and the Brysa, which says that it's mutter to remove the Yabelas b'mikdash. So Idi v'chadam or Idi v'idi b'lacha, really we're all talking about the same type of wort. It's moist, it's still alive and well. The lokasha, and there's not a contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa, because habiyad v'habakli. In our Mishnah, we must be talking about a case where the chatichas hayabelas was bikli, and therefore that's problematic. Masha'ein came the Brisa and Maseches Eruvin must have been talking about biyad, where we said that it's motor to do so. That's only an Isser D'Rabbanan in Shvus b'mikdash. It's okay, you're allowed to do that b'mikdash, not b'medina, but b'mikdash it would be allowed. So it says the Gemara, okay, you've given two very good answers. Why did the two of you not agree with one another? So the Gemara explicates this question at length. Uleman de amar habiyad habikli. According to the one who says that one of the sources was talking about biyad and the other was talking about bikli, why didn't you say like the other person? My time alo amar idi v'idi biyad v'lo kasha v'lacha habiyavesha. Why didn't you give the other person's answer? So it says the Gemara, amar lach yavesha mifrach pricha. That may not even be an Isser D'Oraisa. If you have a wort that's totally dried out and cracked, that may not even be an Isser D'Oraisa. That's why we see a tseruf of this, that when a person has a very, very, very painful cuticle, so the poskim write that if the majority of the cuticle is torn and you're in pain, you can tear it off. That's not Nisr Doraisa. It's not. It's mostly torn off. We consider it off. But okay, so it's Nisr Dorabana. We come. So here we're saying it's even less than that. It's Mifrach Pircha. It's totally not eligible for this conversation. That would be mutter even within our Mishnah if it was Mifrach Pircha. So that's why the first approach didn't say like the second one. We're 12 lines down, quarter of the way down. According to the one who says that both our Mishnah and the Brisa and Eruvin was speaking biyad, was talking about removing the yabelas barehanded, velokasha balacha habi avesha, and he gave the answer of habelacha habi avesha, that the Brisa that speaks about, that says that it's mutter, that's biyavesha, but our Mishnah is talking about balacha. So according to that approach, why didn't he say like the other person? My time lo amar idi v'idi balacha velokasha habiyad v'habakli. Why didn't he say like the other approach? This answers the Gemara, amar lach kli huktani. Hasam im bekli kli huktani hasam. He was taught over there with a kli im bekli kan v'kanasur. We learned that that's an isur doraisa. So if it's an isur doraisa, that shouldn't be mutter anywhere. It shouldn't be mutter in Eruvin. Shouldn't be mutter in Shas. Shouldn't be mutter anywhere. So then that can't be where the Mishnah and Maseches Eruvin, the Brisa Maseches Eruvin, should be lenient. That's a great question. If you're going to say that the kli is an isur doraisa across the boards, then of course you can't use the distinction of haba kli, and that doesn't work at all. So answers the Gemara, I've got an answer. No, hadikatani kli, with a shita that holds of kli, hacha plukta de Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua asala ashmuina. It's coming to teach us this machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. It's not clear from the Gemara what they're talking about, but really what it means is that one of these shitas holds that as long as the abelas is yuvesha, as long as the wart is dried out, then when you cut it with a kli, it's not an isur doraisa. That's a huge, that's a big psak. That's a big psak, that if it's yuvesha and you did it bekli, so we don't say it's an isur doraisa, we would say it's only an isur dorabban. And that brings us to the two dots, 1/3 approximately of the way down on Samaches and Beis. Let's continue. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Umayim shchita, we had said in our Mishnah, just like if shchita is allowed, we should allow all these suri derabanan. And Rabbi Yeshua argued from Yontif. He says, no, by Yontif, we see that Yontif is a mitzvah. That Yontif, we have the heter for shchita, but we still have suri derabanan. That was the machlokas in our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua, l'taime, where do we get Rabbi Yeshua's shita from? Rabbi Yeshua, who doesn't allow for these isurim because he says that Yontif is its own day that's chashav. He holds damar simchas yontov nami mitzvah. He holds that there's a mitzvah by Yontif as well. Titania, the Brisa writes, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, his counterpart holds as follows: Ein lo le'adam b'yom tov ella o ochel v'shose o yoshe v'shone. You are either going to sit and fres or you can sit and learn. But we don't have an obligation to split the day. Namely, there's no obligation to eat food, to have hana, to have the oneg of Yontif, like the way that we normally treat it. This is a famous Gemara that we're about to see, this source in the Brisa. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, no, chalkeyu chetzio lachila ushtia, v'chetzio lebeis hamedrash. The way that one should be spending their holidays, their Shabbases, however they are played out, we should be spending part of our time, of course, eating. We have a mitzvah derabanan, maybe a mitzvah deraisa and Yontif, certainly a mitzvah derabanan on Shabbos, to eat a kezayis of bread, b'chtei achilas pras, 3 times on Shabbos. To be clear, for those of us who may be carb sensitive, the halacha still is the case that we are obligated to have a suda on Shabbos, Friday night, Shabbos morning, Shabbos afternoon. What is the definition of a suda? So we have to eat enough bread in an appropriate amount of time, otherwise you're not yotzei the mitzvos hayom, and you can't bench. This just came up this past Shabbos. We had a zimun because one of my kids ate hamotzi but not enough, and the other kid ate enough. So myself and one kid ate enough. The other kid didn't eat enough, so he couldn't bench. You're not allowed to bench stam. You take one bite of bread. You're not allowed to bench. That's not a shiur of achila. It's also to bench. You have to eat a shiur of achila. But forget the benching piece for the moment. You're not even yotzei your sudos Shabbos. You have to eat enough in the right time. Anyways, the Gemara says that's Rabbi Yeshua's shita. He held that there's chetzio lachem and chetzio lashem. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. And this brisa, what does Rabbi Yochanan say? V'shneim yikra echad darshu. They both understood this, their own shitas, from similar psukim. That says clearly it's for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the holidays for Hashem. It should be for you. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer, Savar okulo lashem okulo lachem. You got to pick one pasuk or the other, but not both. Rabbi Yeshua Omer chelkeyu, and this is the line, chetzio lashem v'chetzio lachem. Part of our avoda on Yontif and on Shabbos is to have oneg Shabbos. Yes, we need to be in the Beis Medrash, and we'll come here, we'll learn Daf Yomi. But everybody has to make sure that there's a Chetzio Lachem and that there's a Chetzio Lashem. It's very difficult to elevate the eating process into something that's kadosh. I'm very bad at that, but that is a lofty level that we need to be mekadesh techol. So some of the Svarim HaKadoshim, they add this idea that when a person is doing something, even something that's begashmias, so you add Yehiratzon that this should be l'shem kedusha sachila and Shabbos. But you add in the framing, l'chavet Shabbos Kodesh. And my Rebbe Muvak, Reb David Miller in Eretz Yisrael, I sat by his table, and I grew up with Southern parents, so you always waited for the host, and thank God I did, because I sat there patiently waiting for Rabbi Miller to start eating, and all of a sudden it got dead silent, and we had all washed already. Everybody had full plates of food, and he looks around the table, Chavet Shabbos Kodesh, and everybody picks up their fork and they started eating. He framed out Kedusha by eating. It's something that we can do. It's a beautiful idea. Okay, good. So that's what the Gemara says. That's the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua about whether or not we say that it's either kulo lashem or kulo lachem versus chetzio lachem and chetzio lashem. Says the Gemara. Amar Rebbe Elazar, the Gemara says almost 2/3 of the way down. Akol modim be'atzeres, everyone agrees on Shavuos to boina nami lachem, that there's an aspect of lachem here implying that you need to be eating food, spending time outside the Beis Medrash, but of course focus on your avodah, my time, because Yom Shenitna Bo Torahu, that's the day we got the Torah. You got to celebrate, absolutely. Amar Rabba Hakol modim b'Shabbos to boina nami lachem, my time. We all agree that on Shabbos that there's a din of lachem. You're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. You're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. It's usher. Then you're not allowed to fast until Chatzos. That's why some minyanim try to daven a little earlier. Okay, these are good shilas. My timer, what's the reason? Because v'karasa l'Shabbos oneg. The pasuk says that on Shabbos you have to have oneg. Rav Yosef. Let's continue with the holidays. We just spoke about 2 dinei d'oraisa. Now Rav Yosef and Amora, 3rd century, he shifts. Hakol modim bePurim deboina nami lachem. A din of lachem by Purim. All of Purim is a din derabanan. What is the din of lachem? Says the Gemara, my time, because you may mishta v'simcha ksivbe. Because the language toward the end of the Megillah, that's of the Megillah's Esther, it says that it was you may mishta v'simcha. He would fast during the days throughout the year. He wouldn't eat during sunlight hours. Levar, with the exceptions of the following: Me'atzarta from Shavuos Upuria from Purim, Uma'ale Yom Kippur, Ma'ale Yom Kippuri, and on Erev Yom Kippur. We know, of course, that we're supposed to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Where is that from? From right here. Let's go through it. Atzeres Yom Shenitna Bo Torah. The reason why he ate during the day, why Mar Berei de Ravina would eat during the day hours of Atzeres, was because that was the day we got the Torah. Puria, on Purim you may mishte v'simcha ksib. Because as mentioned, Megillah Esther writes, "He may mishta v'simcha," and Mala Yoma de Kippurei, and an Erev Yom Kippur, Detani Chia Bar Rav Midifti. This is a brisa that we learned already in Brachos, and we'll learn it in other places in Shas. It's a famous Gemara, a very well-known Gemara, about a very unique mitzvah d'oraisa to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. How does that work out? Detani Chia Bar Rav Midifti. You should afflict yourself on the 9th of the month. Asks the Gemara, afflict yourself on the 9th? We don't fast on the 9th. Yom Kippur's on the 10th. So what are you talking about? We're supposed to fast on the 10th day. So answers the Gemara to teach you the following lesson. Kol ha'ochel v'shoseh b'tisha bo ma'ale alav akasuv kili misane tishi'i ve'asiri. If you eat on the 9th, then it's as if you fasted on the 9th, and then when you fast on the 10th, it's as if you fasted on the 10th. So you get the zechuyos of both. So here with this Gemara, the poskim have a pretty distinguished machlokas about whether or not the mitzvah d'oraisa of eating on Erev Yom Kippur applies to women. On the one hand, it seems to be a mitzvah saseh shel Torah, which is a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. It only applies during daylight hours. There is no nighttime mitzvah. So maybe we should say that like all other mitzvahs, aseh shazman grama, the women are exempt. However, some of the poskim say that no, the whole mitzvah to eat on the 9th is drawn out from the Isra Achila on the 10th. And because there's an Isra Achila on the 10th that a woman is mechuyav in, therefore the Achila on the 9th, she's also mechuyav. So that's a machlokes poskim. Says the Gemara, a couple more short Gemaras, and then we'll stop toward the bottom of the page. Rav Yosef b'yoma de'atzarta Amar, Avdi li igla tilsa. Please make for me an igla tilsa. We've spoken about igla tilsa before. An igla tilsa is either a third-born animal or an animal that's only a third cooked. It's very rare, a very rare cooked animal. One of the two, but it was a delicacy. Amar, Eloha Yoma. Without the day that I got the Torah, the Kagarim that made me who I am, Kama Yosef Ika Beshuka. How many Yosefs? I would just be another guy. This is the phrase, just another Joe. I would be just another guy. I'd be like everybody else. The Torah helped me to extract from within me who I am. I would never have reached my capacity without Torah. None of us will. And that's what the Gemara is saying here. That's why he used to celebrate. It was a special day. Rav Sheshes had a rule in his learning called Tlasin Yomin Mahader Le Talmude. Every 30 days, he would go back and learn over all of his Torah. The Tali, the Koi Be'ibra Dedasha, he was standing by the doorway of his house. The Omar, Chadoi Nafshoi, Chadoi Nafshoi. Chadoi from the word Chad, Yichad, Yisro, they're so happy. My soul should be so happy, my nefesh should be so happy. L'chakroi. It's for you that I learn Psukim, L'chatanoi. It's for you that I learn Mishnayos, that I learn Gemara. So do we learn for our nefesh? Where's the idealism? Yeah, we learn for our nefesh. We have to be misaki in our nefesh. Absolutely. We were given a nefesh. We have to bring it back zach v'tahor. Absolutely. That's the whole process of tshuva. It's way bigger than we are. We all have a chelik elokam imal within us. This is real. This is not, it's not heebie-jeebie pixie dust. This is real. We have that within us, and it's our obligation to learn Torah, to be mishaper, to improve our nefesh. But it says the Gemara, wait a minute, Eini, the Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Ilmali Torah lo niskaimu shamayim va'aretz. Forget about your nefesh. The whole physical world would not be here without the Torah. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, Im lo barisi yomam v'layla chuko shamayim v'eretz lo samti. So how do we deal with this conflict? On the one hand, Rav Sheshes was praising the fact that he learned for his nefesh. And at the same time, we see that learning is much bigger than all of us. It has to do with the kiyum of the entire world. Says the Gemara, no, it's just a question of what was happening at that moment. Meikara, in the beginning, your intentions were more narrow. Ki avid ini shadaite denafshek avid. He was learning for his own sake. Brachos Daf Beis, a little bit over a year ago, a year and 23 days ago, I shared an idea right as we opened Shas, which is this idea. We don't always sense the benefits of learning. It's sometimes hard, other than the yeda, other than the information and the commitment, which is itself valuable. But the learning process itself is for the nefesh. That's what Rav Sheshes is teaching us. Whether or not we understand it, it's like taking an antibiotic. I don't know the chemistry. I don't know how it works, but I know that I now feel better. I know that it is working, and that is something about Torah that we can't fathom. The Torah is hafoch b'hafoch b'dekula, but it totally can improve every element of our life. So that is where Rav Sheshes was coming from with this idea that ki avid inish adaite denafshek avid. Yes, of course it supports the whole world, but it also improves our nefesh. Sorry for the short stop here. We're going to stop at the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom of Maseches and Beis. We'll pick up as much as we can on Shabbos. And again, as mentioned, we'll be learning extra on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday with no Daf Yomi in person or on Zoom on Wednesday. Wishing you all a beautiful night.